Hey everybody, thanks for joining me today. I thought I'd show you the entire painting process that I went through for my latest painting, the Stool Pigeon. How this came about was we were boarding horses for friends, and there was this one horse named Trigger, and he loved to try and get through that clasp on the gate that was held on by a chain, and I'd see him do this often. So I got the idea of having him trying to do this while there was a little bird sitting on the gate who was telling on him. And so that's how this idea came about. So I went out and got some photos of him working the gate. He didn't care I was there. He was intent on doing what he was doing. And so I did have to change it up a bit. I put the barn behind him and opened the doors so that you could see what was on the other side, that he was, if he was able to escape, he would get himself into trouble by going into that barn. So that's the reason why the bird is, theoretically, the reason why the bird is trying to tell on him. So anyways, real quickly, I put in well, first of all, I did my drawing. I transferred it down, and using a light, very light coat of liquid, I sealed the drawing in, let that dry, and now I'm able to work over the top. I used to not seal my drawing, and I would always regret it because down the line I couldn't see it anymore, and it made it pretty difficult for me to stay accurate. So, you know, this was kind of one of my illustration tricks that I learned early on. So anyways, I did this with the dark background, and then I laid in a darker wash where the shadows were, and then I kind of worked the warms and the cools in together. And I'm not working real thick with the paint here, but I am trying to get those value differences between the dark shadows and then the tools, the implements that are setting up against the wall in the barn. And so subtlety is really what I'm going for back here. I want you to be able to see everything, but I don't want you to be obsessed with it or to be paying much attention to it. So I'm just working things back and forth, stepping back a little bit, making sure that the value shifts are enough for you to be able to see. I want that area around his mouth there to be pretty dark so that it pops off well. Now, the chain that he's working in his teeth there, I'm going to have that a bit of a different color than the actual aluminum of the gate itself. I'm going to make it just, you know, the chain will be steel and a bit rusted, because that's the way our chain is. I'm just working on getting everything laid in the back there. I'm not worried about putting in a lot of detail. I just want to get those values as close as I can get them right away, so that I can make my adjustments. Once I get that back done there, the background, I'm not really going to go in and work on it too much, but it's going to take a little while in order to get that to set exactly where I want it. I want you to be able to see that there are tools and implements and stuff in the barn that you don't want the horse to get into, but I don't want it to call so much attention to itself that it's reading as being too important. All right, so I'm just going to continue to work this back here, back and forth. You'll notice that along the right-hand side there, you can see it pretty well. I've got warms and cools, some browns and greens playing off of each other because that's really what was going on back there. And if I was just to put down warms only or cools only, it would really, to my eye, not work all that well. You need to have some of that tension going on between the different temperatures for it to be interesting and to be true to life. So just slowly adding in some of the details. That's the bug spray, the fly spray that gets used on this horse and the other two that were with us. This one's name is Trigger, beautiful Palomino. The other ones that we had were Hollywood and Rocky. But you know, Trigger was definitely the leader of the pack. So what Trigger did, everybody else felt like they needed to do too. I love how the horses, they all have their own personalities, just like any other creature. And pretty much with these guys, they were pretty happy horses. Okay, so now that I've got everything down there, I'm working over it with a large brush and I'm softening the edges. I want to make those values, that background, I want it to set back. And so using that large brush enabled me to do that. Now you lose some of the detail doing that, but that's okay. I always know that I can go back in and work over the top of it. It's wet and it'll stay wet for at least the next few hours, if not days. So I'm not too concerned with that. You should never, if you're working on a painting, consider anything that you're doing too precious to undo. I always figure that I did it once and I can paint it again if I need to. So just reestablishing the outline of the horse. I'm sorry about having to get in front of the camera so much here. It's just one of those things where, you know, when you're working on a painting, you've kind of got to go where you have to go. And I did cut out some of that so that you don't have to look at my shoulder or the back of my arm. But it's really unavoidable. I can't do too much about that. Other than to try to not do it, which I did. I kept looking around at where the camera was. Putting in the shovel handle there. Just piece by piece, you add it in, you wipe it away, you add it back in until you feel like it's where you want it. A couple of times, quite a few times during this process, you'll see that I bump the camera until I kind of get used to where it's at. Yeah, this is the first time lapse that I'm doing on my Canon 70D, and I absolutely love it. Before this, I had to use my Canon 40D, which had no capabilities of doing video. So I did the old-fashioned time-lapse where I'd have it take a picture, a photo every second, and then I stitched it together in Lightroom, which works great, except I wasn't sure back then how to lock down the focus and not have that flickering. So anyways, the quality on this one is quite a bit better than on my first one called Off the Beaten Path. You'll notice that I put in some pops of red in the background there. That's a nice way if you've got neutrals going on in the background to bring it a little bit more to life by popping a few colors in here and there. And I do that more towards the right-hand side where there's more light that's coming in. Now I'm working on getting the side of the barn in there, and that's where the gate is attached to. I'm going to do this rather loosely. You'll find that I'm going to have quite a few of my edges are going to be softer, and I love paintings that have those lost and found edges. If you paint stuff and you don't have those edges that are lost and found, there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I just find that it's more interesting, and it has a better feeling, something that I'm more interested in having. All right, so I got the barn wall in there, and now I'm going to start to put in the gate itself. Now this gate is an aluminum gate, and so it doesn't rust. It's usually pretty silver looking, but you have to make sure that you get the darks in there in order to show that edge turning. So that's what I'll do and I'm looking at the dark edge there of that horizontal gate and the value of that as opposed to what's going on in the background there. I have to make sure that color or that value is where it should be. So you have to be able to see it against the background, but it has to look dark enough so that it reads as a shadow with the sun hitting that top part. And up where that shadow turns into light, there's usually a little bit of a darker edge. And you'll notice that I did that there as well. I did it to all of those edges where it's going to turn up into the light. And then below that, I will work in some warms, just like I'm doing now, and that shows that that's the reflected light. Now you can go with reflected light of a lot of different colors. You can go with browns or with oranges or reds or purples. It just kind of depends on what's reflecting up into it. And here it happens to be, that it's the brown or the yellow ochre of the dirt. And so that bounces and reflects a nice warm light up there. Never allow your reflected lights to be as light as anything that's in the actual light. It needs to be darker than that. So now that you see that I have some nicks going on in that horizontal bar, and I'm just working those in because otherwise, if you don't do that, it looks like it's just a brand new gate, and I want this gate to look like it's been there for a while. This fence has seen a lot of duty, and so I need to make sure that it looks that way. I'm starting to soften some of the edges along this gate and pulling some of the color up into the background. You can always go back in and soften that up if you overdo it. But it's always best not to be afraid as to whether you're going to do too much of that or not. You don't have to go crazy with it, but just understand that if you're going to do it, don't be timid about it. The great thing about oil paint is that it's so forgiving, and you can do whatever you need to with it until it dries, and then once it starts drying, it gets tacky and impossible to work into, and then what you have to do is wait until it dries, and then you can work back into it using some medium, which is oftentimes what I'll do. I mix liquid into my paint, and it gives me that nice wet look, wet into wet again. Now you'll notice that as I'm painting this, I haven't put the bird in. I'm not going to try and paint around him. I'm going to add him in later. I know he's going there, but it's just not important that I have him in there yet. In fact, it's better that I don't, because you're trying to paint around it, and then it's just you just kind of paint in steps. After a while what you're going to do and what's coming later. So putting in the weld marks on the bars going from horizontal to vertical. There's little welds that you can see. Adding in the shadows. And so before too long, I'm sure I'm going to be adding some more nicks into those verticals. With the welds, I noticed that there is a little bit of rust, or it looks like rust. I'm not sure if it actually is, but you get some brown where those welds are. So I wanted to make sure that I got some of that in there. And for me, as I'm working, I'll put something down and I'll know that I'm going to go back into it and I'm going to adjust the edges on it. I'm going to play with it a little bit. Very seldom do I ever put something down and not adjust the edges on it. It's just the way I work, and the way I've seen a lot of the teachers that I have show me that they work as well. So edges are so important, and if you're doing this and you're worried about putting something down and have it be precious, then you're not going to paint to your best ability. You have to trust your abilities, and you have to know that you can make any adjustments that you need to along the way. Continuing the work. This gate here. See, I've softened a lot of the top edges of that as though it's glowing or dusty. All right, there we go. Now we're into working on Trigger here. I start with the dark areas, the darkest darks that are on him, and I'm working rather thinly. I also wanted to put in, since he's a Palomino, he has a light mane. It's not white exactly. It's kind of a soft yellow ochre, but it's definitely lighter than the background and lighter than the rest of his body. So I wanted to get that established just a touch so that I know kind of what I'm aiming for with the rest of his face. And so I'm laying this paint on rather thin. I can still see the drawing that's going on underneath it, and I can wipe away, so I can, if I get something wrong, I can wipe it away and then come back and get it right. And one of the things that you're going to see that I'm working on quite a bit throughout this is trying to get this horse, when he works this gait or this chain, you'll see that he's got a lot of muscles going on in his jaw there and in his cheek. And to me, that is so important that I get those right, and that that you can see and feel that he's really working that to the best of his abilities. And so I'm just starting to lay that in. The general anatomy and musculature of the horse head. And one of the things that I do love about painting Palominos like this, and well, really any horse, but this one in particular, he has warms and cools going on throughout his cheek and under his eyes, around his eyes, and on his muzzle, especially. And that's pretty common with most horses. You get onto their lips and their nose and around that part of their face, and it's generally a nice cool gray. And so I try and work that back and forth a little bit and at least get it started. All right. Well, I think I'm going to just let this continue on. I've got a little bit of music that I'm just going to play for you and let you enjoy the process. And I'll be back in a little bit.
Somewhere out on the prairie, is the greatest cowboy that's ever been. When he lays his hands upon the pony, they shudder with an understanding skin. And he says, ponies, now ponies, don't you worry. I have not come to steal your fire away. I want to fly with you across the sunrise, discover what begins each shining day. Storm clouds in the west are quickly gathering. Well, the ponies, they run wild before it rains. You'll see their sleek, dark bodies brightly gleaming. Oh, the fire is flowing through their veins. And he says, ponies, now ponies, don't you worry. I have not come to steal your fire away. I want to fly with you across the sunrise, discover what begins each shining day. He says, ponies, no ponies, don't you worry. I have not come to steal your fire away. I want to fly with you across the sunrise, discover what begins each shining day. Discover what begins each shining day.
He couldn't walk like he used to. Got down from the saddle and turned him round. Took him back to the home corral. I curried him up and I watered him down. Got a hold of his hoof and cleaned it out. He wanted to thank me, he made that clear. I tried to explain as he nibbled my ear. I said, that's what a pal would do. Help you out when you're feeling blue. You do the same for me, it's true, 'cause that's what a pal would do. I knew a man who was down on his luck, had a herd of cattle, but no truck. Feeling bad, said he might lose his land. Word got out, he needed a hand. Next morning, all of his friends arrived, saddled up for an old-fashioned cattle drive. They rounded him up and went that extra mile. He turned to thank them, they just smiled and said, that's what a pal would do. Help you out when you're feeling blue. You do the same for me, it's true, 'cause that's what a pal would do. If you haven't heard this, then listen in. To have a friend, you've got to be a friend. A short time here, then we're gone with the wind. Tell them you love them, been thinking of them, 'cause that's what a pal would do. Help you out when you're feeling blue. They do the same for you, it's true, 'cause that's what a pal would do. My Palomino got a rock in his shoe.
As I was out a-riding, the last guard from 4 until dawn, the moon was as bright as a reading light for a letter from an old friend back home. And he asked me, why do you ride for your money? Tell me, why do you rope for short pay? You ain't a-getting nowhere and you're losing your share. Lord, you must have gone crazy out there. He said, last night I run on to Jenny. She's married and has a good life. You sure miss a track when you never come back. She's the perfect professional's wife. She asked me, why does he ride for his money? Tell me, why does he rope for short pay? He ain't a-getting nowhere and he's losing his share. Lord, he must have gone crazy out there. Well, I read off the last of my letter. I tore off the stamp for Black Jim. Then Billy rode up to relieve me. He just looked at my letter and grinned. And he asked me, "Say, pard, tell me, why do we ride for our money? Tell me, why do we rope for short pay? We ain't a-getting nowhere, and we're losing our share. God, I guess we went crazy out here." But they've never seen the northern lights, never seen a hawk on the wing. They've never seen the spring hit the Great Divide, and they never heard old Camp Cookies sing. Yodelay, yodelay, lay-o, lay-o, lay. Yodelay, yodelay, lay.
I'm hanging around town, just spending my time. Out of a job, not earning a dime. This feller steps up and he says, "I suppose you're a bronc peeler by the looks of your clothes." Well, you figures me right, and a good one I claim. Do you happen to have any bad ones to tame? Says I got one, a bad one to buck. From throwing good riders, he's had lots of luck. Well, he says this old pony has never been rode, and the boy that gets on him is sure to get throwed. So I gets all excited and I ask what he pays to ride this old nag for a couple of days. He offers me a 10 spot and I says, "I'm your man." For the bronc never lived that I couldn't fan. No, the bronc never lived, nor never drew breath, but I couldn't ride till he starved plumb to death. So he says, "Get your saddle and I'll give you a chance." In his buckboard we hops and we drives to the ranch. Waited till morning, and right after Chuck, I steps out to see if this outlaw can buck. Down in the horse corral, standing alone, this old caballo, the strawberry roan. Legs are all spavin' and he's got pigeon toes, little pig eyes and a big Roman nose. He got little pin ears that's crimped at the tips, and a big 44 branded on his left hip. He's ewe-necked and old with a long lower jaw. I can tell with one eye he's a regular outlaw. Well, I puts on my spurs and I sure feelin' fine. Then I pulls down my hat and I coils up my twine. Filed the loop on him, and well, I knew then, before he gets rode, I'll sure in my tin. I puts the blinds on him, but it sure was a fight. Next comes a saddle and I screws it down tight. Then I steps on and I raises the blinds. I'm right in his middle to see him unwind. Well, he bows his old neck, and I guess he unwound, 'cause he seemed to quit living down here on the ground. Went up towards the east, come down towards the west, and stay in his middle, I'm doing my best. He sure is frog walking and he heaves a big sigh, and he only lacks wings for to be on the fly. Turns his old belly clear up to the sun, he sure is some sun-fishing son of a gun. He's about the worst bucker I've seen on a range. He can turn on a nickel and give you some change, and when he's a buckin' he squeaks like a shoat. I tell you, this pony's sure got my goat. Yeah, I tell you, no foolin', this pony can step, but I'm still in his middle and I'm building a rep. He goes up on all fours, comes down on his side. Well, I don't see how he keeps from losing his hide. I loses my stirrup, and also my hat, and I'm pulling the leather and blind as a bat. Then with a phenomenal jump he goes up on high, leaves me sitting on nothing, clear up in the sky, while I turns over twice, then it comes back to earth, and I lights into cussing the day of his birth. Then I tell you there's a pony that I cannot ride, there's some of them left boys, they haven't all died, and I'll bet all my money ain't a cowpuncher alive that can stay with old Strawberry when he makes his high dive.
Okay, well, we've come a long way since we started listening to some of the music. Just talk a little bit about what happened. Obviously, I put everything in so that it was as close as I could make it on the first pass. I didn't put a lot of the detail in, and we'll be working that as I go along. So far, I'm pretty happy with the way everything's gone down. You can see that on his muzzle, I have a lot of the cools that go on there. It's very grayed out. And I'm starting to work in some of the reflected light that goes in on that neck muscle there and underneath his jawline. Now you're going to see I just popped it into the frame. It's something that I like to do as I go along, just to make sure that the frame is working. The frame that I'm going to be using is going to be working with the values and the colors that I put down. When I first started out, I had problems with, I would paint the painting, I'd get it completely done, and I'd go to put it in the frame, and I'd find that the frame didn't work all that well with the painting. And if I had just made a couple of simple adjustments, it would have worked much better. And so I've learned along the way that as I go, I really need to put it in the frame and make sure that, that it's going to work together the way I think that it should. And that's just adjusting color temperatures, sometimes graying things down, sometimes you know, with the gold fillet, making sure that you have enough gold going on in near the focal point or in the painting that makes them work really well together. Sometimes the gold that you have in your painting is just a little too green or too warm or who knows what, and just a little simple adjustment can make it make that painting really sing when it's in that particular frame. So that's why it's in the frame right now. And you've probably noticed that as we were going along, I've worked a lot back and forth on this on the horse's face, trying to just get it all to work together and making the light parts, or the parts of the horse's face that are in the light, have the right amount of light and color on it. And I can always go back in and add some of that fur or hair that's on the horse. You put that in too soon and you have to make adjustments, and then you're repainting things that you've already tried to finish. So try and save that finishing towards the end until you know that you've gotten the colors and all your values where you want them to be. And that's why you'll see that I work all over the horse, not just in one particular place. You have to kind of bring it all up together in order to be able to judge if something's working or not. Don't just go and finish one part and then find that when you move to a different part, it doesn't work maybe as well as you thought it had. Okay, so now I'm working into the areas along his neck. Hit the camera again. That darn camera. Now on the neck and also on the jawline as I'm working it, I don't want to go straight down and make it look like a long tube. That's why you'll see that I work in little patches, trying to get some of those areas on the horse's face that really show the anatomy, the structure of it, to have the proper highlights on it. So I'll put them down and then knock them back a little bit. You see I do that quite a bit. It's just important that that you don't overdo the value shifts between your lights and your darks. It's very easy to make your darks too dark and have all those shadows die on you. So, you know, be real careful on that. Now, as the edge turns from the area that's in the light to the area that's in the dark, so often, or just the way light works, is that you get a more saturated light as it turns from the light into the shadow. And so you'll notice along the jawline there, I've got a more of an orange or a brown going on, because that's where that jaw turns. And I will soften that up later as I go on, but I want to make sure that I get it in there. And it's also the same on that large neck muscle. And so now you'll notice that I'm starting to soften up the transitions in the neck. And really now it's just a matter of working back and forth until I feel like I got the lights and the darks where they should be, and also playing back and forth with, especially on that muzzle there, the difference between the cool grays and the warm grays. As I go along, I'll add more blue and purple into that muzzle, that gray area. But for right now, it's just important that I get the values right on it, get the lights and the darks. Yeah, you don't put in, horses on that part of their face always have veins that kind of stick out, but you know, we haven't quite gotten there yet. It's important for me to try and resist that urge to, put the highlight on a nose too soon, or to add in those veins in the nose of a horse too soon. If you do it, then if you have to make an adjustment, I find sometimes I'll try and avoid painting over an area because I spent so much time finishing it, but it's really not the way to go. And so we're getting to an exciting part where I get to work a little bit on the mane. It's always nice. Now when I paint in the mane or hair or anything like that has the individual strands on it, you really need to try and look at it as though it were a large unit. You know, don't put those individual strands in right away, because they're just going to get in your way. I know that I can go in and add individual hairs towards the end, and if it looks just like a big whitish blob right now, that's okay. It's just kind of a placeholder until I get to it. Well, I know that I keep talking about this quite a bit, but this is so important when I talk about working your warms and cools in together. If you don't do that and you just put down, let's say I just did him brown or kind of a yellow ochre color, you would really notice that the painting was more of an amateur type painting rather than more of a professional painting. Your eye needs to see that those colors play off of each other, and if they're not there, no matter how subtle they are, if they're not there, your eye will miss them. You may not know why. Something doesn't quite look right, but your eye will miss it, and you'll know that something's wrong. And so to take your paintings to the next level, you need to make sure that you do that.
Old Dollar was a sorrel horse that stood just 15.2. But he was the meanest bronc the cowboys ever knew. Captured in a Mustang band out on the Nevada plains. July sun and summer never sees the winter rains. 1,100 pounds of muscle, bone, and hate. To be a great bucking horse just seemed to be his fate. And the cowboys that got on his back, he'd always buck 'em down. His fame, it grew bigger as he went from town to town. They never named him till one time at a rodeo. It was 15 minutes before they started up the show, when a cowboy said, "I'll bet a buck that horse that you can't ride." That one there without a name, strapped in that sorrel hide. Now that cowboy that made the brag was a tough one to be throwed. But the horse turned out the victor, 'cause the cowboy never rode. So they called that horse Old Dollar from that moment on. And the cowboys that got on his back, they didn't last too long. Dollar, oh Dollar. Dollar was the sorrel horse the cowboys couldn't ride. Dollar, oh Dollar. Picture of a demon strapped up in a sorrel hide. Cowboys were all standing just outside the announcer's stand, when a little girl unnoticed walked up to Dollar's pen. By the time the cowboys turned around, now it was just too late. That little girl was sitting on the top rail of his gate. As the cowboys watched, it made their jaws go slack. That little girl slid out the gate and onto Dollar's back. Well, he bowed up for a second and kinda settled down. Began to walk around like a gentle horse from town. Dollar, oh Dollar. Cowboys tried to ride him and most of them were good. Dollar, oh Dollar. Cowboys couldn't ride him, but that little baby could. Dollar, oh Dollar. Cowboys couldn't ride him, but that little baby could.
Yeah, this neck area along here, along the left-hand side, it's a real balancing act. You want it to feel like it's got that hair on it, but at the same time you want to make sure that you don't overdo it, because it's not really that important of an area. So as you're going away from the focal point, you want to soften that up and make sure that you play it down a bit, even more than you would see in your reference. Everything has to be subordinated to the focal point, which is not only where he's got the chain in his mouth, but the bird that I'm going to be adding here pretty soon. Now I'm going to start working on that chain. It's time to add the details in. Make sure that you've got all the links working the way they're supposed to, and that they're popping off so that you can see what he's doing. It needs to be subtle, but not so subtle that you have a hard time seeing that he's got that chain in his mouth. And we've got some shadow going on the chain that's being blocked by part of the horizontal pipe of that gate. I just go in and I add in the detail as I see it and try and make that chain look as three-dimensional as possible. I have reference of it, but at the same time, I'm not painting it exactly the way the reference is, because it's not the best, and I want this to read quickly and easily. And continuing to work some of the shadows into the underside of his chest there. And we're kind of getting into the fun part of the painting now, where you start adding in the details and adjusting your shadow areas. I wanted to make sure that that area right there along the eye, you could see what was going on with the eye, the eyeball itself, and I needed to lighten up that that shadow that was going on right in front of the eye. Adding highlights as I go, working them back and forth. Now I can start adding individual hairs into that mane, because I know that the neck that goes up to his poll, which is the top of his head, is about as detailed as I want it to be right now. So that means that I can start putting individual strands of hair or clumps of hair over the top and not have to worry about having to repaint it later. So you may be noticing that I go and I paint over something, and then I'll go paint something else, then I'll come back and paint over what I had just painted over. And I do a lot of correcting as I go along. There was a wonderful painter named John F. Carlson who wrote a book, quite a while ago now, called Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting. And it's pretty much the Bible for landscape painters. And in it, he writes that a good picture is a series of good corrections. And that is so true. And if you understand that that's the process, you're not going to feel bad about going in and changing things. And the only time that it's wrong is if you knowingly leave something on your canvas that you could have fixed and painted better. You have to get it down, and sometimes you have to get it wrong before you can get it right. And so if you're painting along and you feel like, oh, all I'm doing is correcting this, or why can't I get this right on the first try? It's just kind of the nature of the beast. Some people can, and some of us on planet Earth, we just keep plodding along and keep at it. I'm just too stubborn to give up on it. So I just keep going until I feel like, yeah, okay, this is right. And then I leave it alone.
When evening chores are over at our ranch house on the plains, all I've got to do is lay around. I saddle up my pony and go riding down the trail to watch the evening sun go down. Riding down the canyon just to watch the sun go down. A picture that no artist e'er could paint. White-faced cattle roaming along the mountainside. I hear a coyote howling for his mate. Cactus plants are blooming, sagebrush everywhere. Granite spires are standing all around. I tell you folks, it's heaven to be riding down the trail to watch the evening sun go down. brush everywhere. Granite spires are standing all around. I tell you folks, it's heaven to be riding down the trail, to watch the evening sun go down, to watch that desert sun go down.
Okay, well, we've gotten to the bird. I knew that we would. Just took a little while. Okay, so this little bird is called a verdin, or verdin. They live in the southwestern United States, and it has a gray body and a yellow head, very striking looking, and it has a rust color little shoulder patch on it. And it's a pretty small bird. I think it's probably 4.5 inches, kind of maximum size, and a very tiny beak on it. And from what I understand, they eat insects, just like most birds do. And at least this one is up in Trigger's business and wants everyone to know that there's a jailbreak going on. But they do live here in Prescott. You don't see them very often, but and I think at least in this central part of Arizona, this is about as far north as you're going to find them. You get over more towards California and Las Vegas, and you'll find them farther north than this. But just trying to put in the very basic values, shadow side and light side. And then I'll go in and fix him up as I go to get his beak in there. No individual feathers at this point. I'm just simply shading. And I need to make sure that that his edges are softer. He's kind of a fluffy little fellow when he's not up flying, and I want to make sure he doesn't look like he's pasted on that background, so I need to have some softer edges on him. I'll get that shadow underneath him to make him look like he's actually sitting on that rail. It was important to me that he wasn't just sitting there passive, but I had to make him active. So make sure that he opened his beak and was looking up at Trigger. Very interested in what he's doing. You know, these birds around here, probably like birds everywhere, but you get kind of close to their nest and they're not real happy about it. So it could just be this fella's letting Trigger know that his nest is in there. Maybe going in there isn't such a good idea because this guy's warned him he can defend himself.
Come on, boys.
Doesn't look like Trigger's too worried about it, though.
Come on, boys. There's nothing like the sound of a barn full of horses eating. There's nothing like picking out your favorite, though it ain't her turn. There's nothing like saddling up before dawn and leaving. She feels real fresh. You got a whole tank of gas to burn. There's nothing like striking a long trot across the flats. She's got one ear up and one keeps a check-in back. You know she'll try to do anything you ask. You know she'll try to do anything you ask. There's nothing like climbing out into the sun's first rays. I ain't ever been any closer to the angels than on those days. There's nothing like cutting a track on that missing pair. It's damn sure fresh. They're out there pretty close somewhere. You follow those tracks and your mare, she sees them too. There's nothing like admitting sometimes she sees them better than you. She carries you over rough places you might not go. On another horse, but with her you've come to know. She'll get you there if you stay out of her way. She knows this game, and it's one she loves to play. She spots him first, up under a rocky ledge. You hold him up a little and talk to him till they lose their edge. She takes a step and they slide off nice and slow. Your mare, she knows just how fast to go. There's nothing like having a thought, and she thinks it too. Buddy, there ain't no space anywhere between her and you. There's nothing like trotting home when the day's work's through, and you realize what a gift has been given to you. You turn her loose, she rolls and rolls again. She don't look back as she trots out to join her friends. They're heading in just before the sun's done leaving. There's nothing like the sound of a barn full of horses eating. No, there's nothing like the sound of a barn full of horses eating.
Well, looks like we've come to the end of this tutorial. Thank you for tuning in. We're just about all done there. Nothing left to do but sign the painting. And here's what it looked like when I got a good photo of it. Thank you very much for tuning in. And until the next time, I'll see you later.